All right. Good morning, guys. Good morning. So, I promised y'all a hell of a show this morning about Chevron deference. And sorry, guys, you're not going to get it because SCOTUS ruled on the POTUS immunity question yesterday, and we just have to cover that. So that just moved everything to the right just a little bit. That means immunity today, Chevron deference tomorrow. Thursday is going to be about some other rulings. I may have to mention a few of the other rulings today in this context, and then it'll be Firearms Friday, and then holy shit, it's the weekend. and all that includes the by the by. Thursday is the 4th of July. So let's holy shit, let's do this. All right, and good morning. I'm gonna have to get a little bit careful. Oh shit. Whoa. Oh, One of my monitors just kind of hiccuped a little bit. That is unacceptable. Okay, so I'm gonna have to get a little bit tricky with some stuff here to show off the pieces I want to share. All credit to Mario for sending these over to the infamous thread, but I'm gonna have to be real careful about how I show these. Okay. So what we got? What do we got? The SCOTUS ruling has come down. Perfect. The SCOTUS ruling has come down that the president, and let me be clear, this is not explicitly Donald Trump individually, but presidents broadly, right? Any person who holds the office of the president does in fact have immunity from prosecution for any official acts taken while he is the president. That language is important. Is immunity from prosecution. And somehow, these nutjob lefties are going off with this nonsense, right? I'll get to the stories about it, but there's plenty of people doing legal analysis on the meaning, and I'm going to do a little bit of legal analysis to explain what sociopaths these people are. So let me throw you a little bluff, a little bottom line up front. Here is the claim, the argument that I'm about to make, or rather, this is the argument, and it's the one that I'm about to support with the evidence that I'm about to present. We need, like, if I had my way, personally, voting would be the explicit province of landowners who pay taxes. Right up until we abolish all taxes. Right? Now, that may sound a little self-serving since I myself am a landowner now. But the fact is that is a relatively recent development. And I have held that position for long since before I bought this nice big old chunk of property out here. Even while I was renting and working my ass off to build that nut so that I could blow it on a big old chunk of forest. I held that position. Cameron, I'm sure, remembers us having this conversation. And the reason that I that I say that, the reason that I hold that standard and would prefer that we handle our voting that way, is because what we have right now is the majority of voters don't have any skin in the game. Or at least they don't think they do. Because they do not pay the taxes. More than half of Americans pay either zero or less than zero in taxes. And if you are a net expense, then your voting is always necessarily a vote based on your individual personal interest and not in the interest of the country. Because by being in that position, you cannot profit by the country profiting. Whereas if you've got skin in the game and your vote considers, how does this affect the taxes that I pay? How does this affect the value that I receive from the expenditure of those taxes? Right? That's a very different set of math than how much of the taxes that the rich people pay can I get into my pocket? Right? So if I had my way, voting would be for landowners who are also net positive taxpayers. But that's an ideal world. But the argument that I'm about to present for you is that we need some sort of civics or literacy or civic literacy test as part of the voter registration process. You should have to be qualified to vote. Because it's one thing to be civilly illiterate. It is another to be so civilly illiterate that your understanding of what you're voting on is objectively the opposite of what is true. As is the case with all of these people I'm about to show you. Now, credit where credit's due, Mario generated this collection of leftist psychopath tweets. And this first one is basically the biggie, right? This is the one that kind of frames up the whole thing. So if Joe Biden declared today that November's election is canceled and ordered the military to keep him in power, would that be an official act? No, it wouldn't. You see, an official act is necessarily an act that the president has the constitutional authorization under the law to perform. Right? And the ruling, the majority opinion is very clear that the president does not enjoy immunity from prosecution for acts which are not official acts. Right? So if the president were to, picking a random example with no interesting or amusing context whatsoever, draw a pistol and murder a man in the middle of downtown New York City, for example, that would not in any way be an official act. That would be an individual personal act taken in clear contravention, clear violation of the law. Now, this is actually an interesting distinction between the American president and, for example, the British royalty. The British royalty do enjoy that level of immunity. That's something that's been discussed and argued ad nauseum by political scholars and in parliamentary arguments in the UK. The current monarch can, in fact, simply kill people. Now, it's not done. It's not done for many reasons, most of which have to do with decorum and political posture. But it is the case. So, if the president were to commit a crime, he does not enjoy prosecutorial immunity. Now, this, in fact, in my opinion, does not go far enough, but I'll get to that in a minute. And that is part of what is expressed in the opinion. Now, what the opinion should say is that the president enjoys absolute immunity from all prosecution, no matter what, while he is in office, and after he's left office, he continues to enjoy prosecutorial immunity for all official acts taken while in office. What that would mean, practically, is that if the president were to simply murder someone because he wanted to, in front of witnesses, and there's no doubt that he did it, while he's in office, that he cannot be prosecuted for that as a crime. And don't jump up and down too hard just yet, I'm getting to it. But once he leaves office, anything that he did as an official act, which, by the way, does not include that murder that he may have committed, which is not an official act while he was in office, is now fair game for prosecution, right? So here's the theory. You're in office, you murder somebody in full view of the public. You cannot simply be arrested and incarcerated and await trial while you are currently the president. After you've left office, right? And when I say after you've left office, I mean you have just attended the inauguration of the president who is replacing you, and leaving that inauguration, you commit a murder. Absolutely, you are vulnerable to prosecution by whatever immediate authority is available to arrest and prosecute you. However, if the president is not immune from all prosecution while he serves, while he is in office, then he is vulnerable to prosecution, even illegitimate prosecution, which threatens to disrupt and interfere with the official duties of the president while he is in office. But remember, the language is important here, because what I said is, in those circumstances, he is immune from prosecution. Thankfully, the founding fathers saw fit to offer us an alternative, a solution. And it's the impeachment process. Impeachment is the process by which one prosecutes a president for high crimes and misdemeanors. This is explicitly described in the Constitution. There's not even a question here. Now keep in mind, all of the psychotic, illegitimate prosecutions, all of the cases, all of the criminal cases against Donald Trump right now, including those that have already been settled, right? Like he was convicted of 34 felonies, right? This Supreme Court decision, while it has not itself explicitly overturned that conviction already, will be a major part of the basis on which this is overturned. But let's get back to the impeachment process. So, when the impeachment process is joined, the House files the articles for impeachment, votes to send those articles to the Senate. Okay? So, what the House does is the president's equivalent to an indictment, right? We believe that the president has committed a crime for which there should be a trial and a sentence and a punishment. Then it goes to the Senate, and the Senate votes. The Senate conducts an investigation, offers evidence, argues the facts, argues the politics, let's be real, and then votes on impeaching the president. And once the president is impeached, right, like we saw this with Bill Clinton, merely being impeached is not identical with being removed from office. Now, I suspect that for many of you, what I'm explaining right now is kind of a no-brainer, kind of a duh, right? A lot of you who watch this show, even if you were real dumb when you first started watching this 10 years ago, you've been educated the fuck up if you've kept up with me and my coffee drinking. So a lot of this may sound like a no-brainer, but I'm going to ask you to share this. I'm going to ask you to share this show, particularly this episode, especially with people who you don't think would want to watch my show. I would love to see my comments blow up with people attempting to tell me why I'm wrong here. Now, so you understand that the impeachment process is the equivalent of conducting an indictment, a prosecution, a conviction, and a sentencing for a president, right? And for any, for many other types of elected officials. For example, right now, in response to the Supreme Court's majority opinion that presidents generally do enjoy immunity, prosecutorial immunity for official acts while in office, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has filed articles of impeachment, or is drafting articles of impeachment to impeach the Supreme Court. Or at least to impeach. Basically, she's trying to impeach everybody that Trump put on the Supreme Court. But she's like, that's already in progress. She's attempting to impeach the Supreme Court. So, here's the real crux of the matter that you need to understand, and this is why it's important politically. Xander Mack, Alex mentions they know it's a non-issue. They're using as a political tool. I don't even entertain them. If we had a history of criminally prosecuting former presidents, their argument might mean something. Here's the trick. Imagine when in history we have prosecuted a president or a former president for any crime at all. It's never happened. While Barack Obama was in office, twice, he murdered American citizens using military technology without legitimate authorization. He just ordered the murder of two separate American citizens who were, at the time, in Yemen. Right? We're talking about the Alakis, right? Father and son. And one of these citizens is a 16-year-old boy. And not only did he murder two American citizens without due process or trial, he did it on foreign soil in a country with whom we are not at war, with no legislative approval. He just did it as a direct military action into a non-hostile nation. That's insane. It's insane that he wasn't impeached over that, over each of those two as separate counts. And he has not been prosecuted over that since it happened. Now that tells us a couple of things. The use of the prosecutorial tools against Donald Trump are explicitly and exclusively political activities, right? This is clearly, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because we know this. We've already discussed this in pretty good detail previously. But it is patently and nakedly obvious. It is clear that what is happening right now is a coordinated campaign of election interference. And the correct response is a massive RICO case. And a legitimate and honest RICO case. Like, I'm not a fan of RICO. I'm not. I think RICO is an abuse of government authority. But it is there. And this may be the most legitimate application that has ever occurred for a RICO trial. And an honest and fair, legitimate RICO trial would absolutely consume, I'd say at a minimum, 90% of the entire Democrat elected population. Every elected official with a D next to their name, like 90% of them would be ate up in this election, in this conspiracy. Hey, I see the sun never sets on American exceptionalism. Cracking jokes about Big Mike. Woo! Yeah. So here's the real problem with the idea of presidents being open to prosecution. And let's be clear before I go too far down this rabbit hole that I'm about to go down. The Democrats used the impeachment process in this way twice with Donald Trump. And the fact is that the impeachment process exists largely to prevent the chain of theoretical hypothetical events that I'm about to describe. But imagine a president does not have immunity for official acts while in office, right? Take the case of Donald Trump, for example. And imagine that he has, let's see, what's a good example of something that he actually did that they accused him of a crime for? But you know what? Let's go with the Russia hoax, right? Let's go with the Russia hoax. So a prosecutor could, in fact, a prosecutor could, in fact, make the argument that, hang on, back up. Okay. Part of the Russia hoax made the argument that Donald Trump was conducting espionage against the United States on behalf of the Russian intelligence mechanism. Okay. Now, the House of Representatives is not going to file articles of impeachment against, let's say, somebody like me, right? Say, while I was on active duty, somehow I came under suspicion of colluding with the enemy. For one, they wouldn't use the word collude. They used the word collusion to describe Donald Trump and the theory of his involvement with Russia, precisely because once you start actually accusing someone of crime, there is no crime, right? Collusion, there is no crime called collusion. The crime that they were attempting to accuse him of without using the legal criminal definition was conspiracy to defraud. But once you accuse somebody of a crime, you've opened yourself up to an important and dangerous can of worms. Once you falsely accuse somebody of a crime, now you've opened yourself up to defamation suits. You've opened yourself up to falsification of government reporting. A whole great big fucking can of worms. That's why you heard the word collusion over and over and over again. Because as soon as anybody said conspiracy to commit or conspiracy to defraud, which is the crime they wanted you to understand that he had committed without risking the legal hazard of making the actual accusation, then they've opened that can of worms. So, assume for a moment, for the sake of argument, that I, as an intelligence community member, were under suspicion of espionage. And, yeah, I would either be arrested by military police and court-martialed, or I would be arrested by local authorities and prosecuted. right? And a big part of the beginning of that is you're arrested and incarcerated while you await arraignment, sometimes until trial, depending on whether or not you pay your bail, etc. You might, if you don't get to bond out, you might spend, for example, 2 or 3 years incarcerated. In fact, a sufficiently friendly judge, it might not even matter if you've got Trump's money. He might deny you bail for any number of reasons, legitimate or otherwise. Now, so when you're talking about a regular citizen, even a regular citizen in a position of substantial authority and power, but not an elected official, it's a different matter. When you're talking about someone who has to have authority above and beyond the legal authority available to non-government agent citizens, and incidentally, this is why Section 242 that we talk about on this show often, deprivation of civil liberties under color of law, this is why that particular law is so important. As a government agent at any level, you are afforded certain authority above and beyond authority available to individual citizens. That means that if you are a government agent at any level, you are at least more above the law than the average citizen. Now, in theory, you also have more restrictions on your liberty because you have agreed to certain stipulations as part of your contract to be employed by the government. For example, as an active duty enlisted member, right, you essentially surrender your First Amendment right to free speech. You essentially surrender your Fourth Amendment rights and well, to a lesser extent, your Fifth Amendment right? You know, as an active duty military member, especially if you're living on base in the barracks, you are not securing your person's properties and papers. There is a non-commissioned officer who can enter your room without your permission or even knowledge at any time he likes to inspect the condition of your quarters. And that's like, so it's important to understand that at any level of government service, you are granted authority, which the exercise of which necessarily places you outside of exposure to the laws related to that authority. Okay? Sometimes that authority and exception is not an absolute exemption, right? Take, for example, police officers using lethal force. Law enforcement found in a situation where they have to employ lethal force will be investigated differently than a citizen who has committed a homicide. In fact, the citizen will be investigated for having committed a homicide with the suspicion that what they did was murder. And the objective will be to prove that the citizen committed murder. The police officer will be inspected with the expectation that what the officer did was likely an authorized use of deadly force, and the objective of the investigation will be to prove that it was deadly force, not to prove that it was authorized deadly force, not to prove that it wasn't. Right? So the investigation of the civilian citizen seeks to prove the bad thing, seeks to prove guilt, whereas the investigation of the officer has the objective of proving innocence or proving authorization. With an impeachment, right? And same thing here. That citizen, while he's being investigated for homicide, may very well be incarcerated during that period. In fact, he may be incarcerated for that entire period. Whereas the officer, at worst, is likely to be on administrative leave. Maybe, if there's some suspicion that he did it wrong, he'll be on unpaid administrative leave. But he will not have his freedom stripped from him in that case. And even then, if it's determined that the shoot was bad, well, the fact under the law is that a bad shoot is murder, the likelihood that he will be charged with murder is very low. In fact, he will more probably be fired from that job and just hired by a different police department. Now, there is some degree to which that is an abuse of the authority. There is some degree to which that is the legitimate purpose of the separation of the category that determines the authority. Because, right, I talked a little bit about my opinions of police yesterday, but let's be real. Let's assume that, if we had police the way that we wish and hope that we had police, then the ability to employ deadly force and the moral capacity to do it correctly is a necessary component of the profession, right? But that's part of the standard that we expect from those government agents, is that they have the moral, philosophical, and intellectual capacity to make right choice at cusp. This is important. This is the difference between a child and an adult. We're about to look at a lot of children here, too. In the case that an official for who the path to justice involves the impeachment process, there is no incarceration. Their ability to continue to perform their duties throughout the course of the impeachment process is not hampered or interfered with by an incarceration, whereas with a prosecution, they are. That is an incredibly important distinction. Donald Trump was impeached twice. He continued to do business as usual. Now, in both of the cases where Donald Trump was impeached, it was clearly and obviously an illegitimate impeachment. And in both of those cases, the impeachment process interfered with the conduct of his activity. But, let me bring you back around to the dangers of using prosecution when you're talking about a currently serving president. And these principles can be extrapolated down through lesser offices, but at the level of the president. Do you understand what a pocket veto is? Legislation can expire on the president's desk, right? Legislation can die on the desk without the president actually vetoing it. And normally, a pocket veto is used as a political tool where the president just refuses to sign it quietly. He doesn't come out and say, I actively oppose this bill and I am vetoing it, which is his right. He has the authority to do that. But he also has the authority to just not sign it. That's a pocket veto. So, hypothetical. You got a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and Donald Trump in the White House. And he's been lying the whole time about not wanting to ban abortion. Right? Forget for a moment about the fact that we don't need to ban abortion. It's already a crime to murder children. Let's assume that we get all the way up to a national abortion ban on Donald Trump's desk. And there it is. He hadn't signed it yet, but he's gonna. And he's been very, very clear that he intends to sign it. Here we go. But the president is not immune to prosecution. Now, what's to stop some random porn star and some crooked DA in the same district from manufacturing the new Stormy Daniels claim. And then, you got a Fannie Willis or DA Bragg shows up at the White House to arrest the president and put him in jail. And just keep him there for a month or two even. Right? Ties it up in a court, gets a friendly judge to deny bail. And then the whole thing falls apart because everybody knows it's complete bullshit. Whole thing falls apart. President gets out. Hell, the judge might even be disbarred. The DA gets thrown the fuck out. Right? Everybody involved in that illegitimate prosecution has just committed career suicide. Does one expect that there are not Democrat operatives who would be more than happy to sacrifice their entire careers for an outcome like forcing a pocket veto on a national abortion ban, for example? See, what we're seeing right now is that prosecutors who constitutionally, let's be clear, the Supreme Court did not just make a decision. The Supreme Court just said, no, the Constitution says that what you're doing is not allowed. In fact, to be very clear, the Constitution says what you can do, and this isn't on the list. Y'all gotta understand the way this government works, the way this government's supposed to work, is if you want to do a thing as a government agent, you have to pull up the Constitution and point at it and say, hey, the Constitution says that I can do X, therefore I can do it. In fact, that is one of the most principal key differences between the citizen and the government agent. For the citizen, whatever is not forbidden is permitted. Period. That doesn't mean it's not that doesn't mean it's a good idea. That doesn't mean it's morally okay. That means that the law, for the citizen, the law is prohibitive, not prescriptive. The law does not tell you what you are allowed to or required to do. This was one of the this was where Obamacare was a huge tangent away from the tradition of law, American law, constitutional law, and even British common law, English common law, right? Because the Obamacare law was prescriptive. It said you must take explicit action or be punished for not taking an affirmative action. The closest we've come to that in law in this country is the draft and car insurance. Now, with the draft, there were conditions. And that's a whole conversation right there about equal protection under the law. With car insurance is not totally mandatory because it is conditional. It is not that the law doesn't say you must have car insurance. The law says you must have car insurance if you own a personal vehicle and you operate that vehicle on a taxpayer-funded highway, road, street, etc. If you do not own a car, or even if you own it, like if you have a farm, right? You operate a farm. You might have your regular car that you use to go out on the town, go grocery shop, etc., etc. If you've got a pickup truck that never leaves the property, it only operates on the farm. It's a farm vehicle. you don't have to carry insurance on that. Only when you take your private vehicle onto a state-funded thoroughfare do you have to have insurance. That's a major, so Obamacare was a major divorce there. But it got pushed through. So as a citizen, whatever is not forbidden is permitted. As a government agent, it is precisely the opposite. If you do not have the explicit enumerated authority granted to you by authorization through an act of Congress or through the Constitution, and if through an act of Congress in compliance with the enumerated powers of the Constitution, if you do not have the explicit enumerated authority as a government agent, then your action is forbidden. Period. So when you come back to the idea of a prosecution, that is an important distinction from the impeachment process. And I know I've probably flogged this particular equine into obscurity already. I will put the beating bat away, and let's take a look at these tweets, and then if we have time, I've got a couple of articles pulled up about it, because there's still, yeah, let's get into this, and I'll make the point. This is what the articles are, to make this other point. So this guy says, so if Joe Biden declared today that November's election is canceled and ordered the military to keep him in power, would that be an official act? No, it wouldn't, you fucking moron. Like I was just describing, it can only be an official act if it is authorized through the enumerated powers of the Constitution. Nowhere in the Constitution will you find that the president has the authority to suspend elections and conduct a military coup against a political rival. Yeah, life lesson. It just says it would be an official act. Oh, treason! Somebody's reading the fine print, keeping up, right? So, come on. How do we go? Okay, now you got Harry Sisson. Wow, this guy has the best shit takes. Okay, Harry Sisson, this fucking child. According to the Supreme Court, Biden could now send in SEAL Team 6 to take all of them out. He could send in the military to take out Trump. He has immunity for official acts now. No. You, child, clearly are not intelligent enough to be trusted with the sacred duty, which is not a right. You do not have a right to vote. You have a sacred duty if you have the authorization to vote. And we have extended that authorization far too far. This psychopath, this sociopath, this fucking cult member does not have the cognitive capacity to make intelligent decisions about policy maneuvers. Period. And that is clear from this tweet alone, where he has made it obvious what the Koreans would call myung-baek-hee. It's as obvious as if my face were white. He says he has immunity for official acts now. That is not what the Supreme Court said. They said he is immune from prosecution. What they said is, if the president does something illegal, he has to be impeached, not prosecuted. What they said is, no, Fannie Willis, you cannot walk into the White House and arrest the sitting president over a stack of parking tickets. Because, here's another scenario. Forget about the pocket veto for a moment. Let's assume that a random prosecutor could just prosecute the president. They could make up some bullshit prosecution. Doesn't matter what it's for, right? Like the the next Stormy Daniels, the next fake Stormy Daniels story, right? They could just make up a prosecution that's going to fall apart in a month or two, or hell, even in just a few hours, right? Let's say Donald Trump or any president whose travel plans, unfortunately, are announced. Now, there's some security there. Exact times aren't announced, but let's say it's been announced that the president has a meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin to discuss peace, and it's going to happen on Thursday. Okay. Well, now all you need is a friendly prosecutor in a district that has an interest in the war continuing, doesn't want the peace talks to happen. They send that friendly prosecutor with a manufactured charge that's going to fall apart by the end of the week. The president still misses his flight, misses the meeting. It's run in the newspapers on the front page that it happened because he was being charged with some felony. It falls apart by the end of the week. He misses the meeting. We look like assholes to the world. Peace talks break down. The headlines on all the newspapers are probable felon president causes peace talks to break down. And then when the charges fall apart, he gets out and goes back to business as usual. The retraction, the correction, right? The reporting on, oh, well, it turns out it was all bullshit, is at the bottom of the back of the paper. It's below the fold after the sports section. It's not even near the comic strips. Probably not even in the same size font. But this fucking moron, this fucking child, he has immunity for official acts now. See, this is the lie. I honestly don't believe he's this stupid. Right? And I don't believe he's this stupid because he's young and quite successful. And I'm gonna get to this a little more in just a minute here with the judges. Right? I'm about to point out some stuff that's gonna blow your mind if you're not already tracking on it. This kid is wealthy and successful doing this. So my suspicion is that he's not stupid enough to actually believe this. My suspicion is that he is paid well enough to tell this lie willfully and intentionally on the orders of the people paying him. And I suspect that's true of most of the tweets that I'm about to show you. By the way, we're already 20 minutes over, and frankly, I'm not turning this show off this morning until I'm done talking about this. Y'all hang out as long as you can. I love having you here. I appreciate the hell out of it. We're 50 minutes in. If you haven't already, please go ahead, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And especially share. If we can get more live viewers in before the show's over, that would be especially awesome. So yeah, bear with me just a second. I'm going to pop over to the Rumble side and see if I'm missing any comments over here. Doesn't look like it. I usually don't get as many live comments on Rumble, but I get quite a few viewers over there. Okay. Looks like we're good over there. So, back to what I was talking about. So that's the Harry Sisson take, right? And that's the lie they tell. It's very similar to the lie that they've been telling following the debate, right? We keep being told, oh, well, Biden is a good man, and he got up there and he knew the numbers and he was super honest. But, you know, Trump Trump looked better, and he's a better talker, right? Because these people don't use intelligent words like speaker or orator. He talks good. I believe you mean he speaks well, but sure, go on. Let's hear what you have to say. But he just told lie after lie after lie. Oh, like what, for example? Well, for one, he refused to commit to accepting the outcome of a free and fair election. I'm going to have an aneurysm. Okay. Thing one. Let's assume for the sake of argument that he did in fact refuse to commit to accepting the outcome of a free and fair election. That is not a lie. If you ask him the question, will you commit to accept the outcome of a free and fair election, and he says no, right? Even if he says, like, goes out of his way to explicitly say, I will not accept the outcome of a free and fair election, that's still not a lie. It's not an example. And then the fact is, it is a lie to say that he refused to accept the outcome of a free and fair election, right? This is how they lie. They lie by changing the language. The question that was asked was, will you accept the outcome of the election no matter what? To which Donald Trump answered, right? He was asked this question 3 times. The second time, he just changed the subject and didn't answer the question. But the first and third time, he said, I will absolutely accept the outcome of a free and fair election, assuming it is a free and fair election. So he absolutely committed to accept the outcome of a free and fair election. He would not commit to accept the outcome no matter what. Because what they want him to say is that if we obviously steal the election again and then publish a giant article in Time magazine that details explicitly how we broke the law for the purpose of defrauding the American people at the voters' booth, that you will accept that as a legitimate election, even though we go out of our way to describe it otherwise. And he refused to say, I will totally let you fuck me like that again. That's how they lie. Harry Sisson here is telling that lie here. He says he has quote unquote immunity for official acts now. Having immunity and having immunity from prosecution, as I have way over described this morning, and I apologize for being a little too lengthy on that, are two very different things. Bradley P. Moss, blue check mark. The Supreme Court just gave Biden unequivocal immunity to order the military to take action against Trump today, right now. No. The Supreme Court just said that if Biden orders the military to take action against Donald Trump today, right now, then a prosecutor can't go arrest Biden for doing that. He has to be impeached for it. He would have to be impeached, not prosecuted. Dash Dobrovsky. I strongly encourage Joe Biden to take advantage of his absolute immunity, which he has been lawfully granted by Trump's Supreme Court justices, to do whatever official acts he needs to do in order to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. That is not only it's the same misinterpretation, deliberate, psychotic misinterpretation. And these guys are all blue checkmark, young, paid, Democrat, professional propagandists. This chick, I don't know who she is, but this one. If the SCOTUS rules in favor of absolute presidential immunity, Joe Biden should lock up all SCOTUS justices, call off the election, and exile Donald Trump until MAGA psychosis passes. Okay, that sounds like, what is that called? Oh, that's called a coup. This one. So basically, a president could order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his political opponent, and it's okay. Court says you can't examine motive when a president is acting under an explicit constitutional authority, which would include the commander-in-chief. No, 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 no. There are also rules for how the president can use the military vis-a-vis U.S. citizens. At best, you could argue that the president could send the National Guard after a citizen, depending on the situation. Like, for example, if you have rioters burning down cities, the president absolutely has the authority under the Constitution to use the National Guard to quell that particular riot. Well, no, I'm sorry. Look, I'm sorry. I misspoke there. The president has the president is in a position. The president is in a position there to authorize the National Guard. It's really the governors that have the authority to deploy the National Guard in those circumstances, and the president should be on board. The empty wheel. Great news, and really I'm showing you this because I want y'all to see this over and over again. Roberts did authorize Joe Biden to send SEAL Team 6 after Alito as an official act. All you MAGA morons celebrating in my mentions realize that Joe Biden is president right now, and SCOTUS just ruled he can do whatever the fuck he wants as long as it's an official act. And that's the thing. Crimes are not official acts. The president doesn't have the authority to send SEAL Team 6 to murder a political opponent. Doesn't have the authority to do the whole thing. Then you got these. So kill them all and Trump, problem solved. Time for Biden to assassinate Trump. So just call to assassinate Trump officially and you'd be fine. Those right there, y'all, it was mid last summer, I think is what happened when it happened. A man threatened to assassinate Joe Biden on Twitter. A man who was physically disabled, couldn't move around without a walker or one of those rascal scooter things, threatened to kill the president on Twitter, demonstrated absolutely no capacity to accomplish this end beyond the fact that he owns some firearms. And he was killed in his home the next morning by federal agents. Understand, within a couple of days after that, there was a woman who made a similar threat against President Trump, indicating that she intended to assassinate President Trump at one of his rallies, right? This is all last summer. And she was interviewed by the FBI. She was interviewed by a pair of FBI agents in suits. So, an old fat man in a fucking scooter said he wanted to kill President Biden. And a huge team of armored fucking tactical assault troopers from the FBI showed up and killed him in his home. They murdered him in his home in the pre-dawn hours the next fucking morning. It was almost instantaneous. Go back and look up some of those articles. I dare you, I defy you to find me one that even mentions the man holding a firearm when they arrived. I guarantee you won't find one that says he fired first. And if you do, it's a lie. You can compare that to the official reports. I covered that one pretty extensively when it happens. Okay, so I have this article pulled up from CNN that talks about the key takeaways. and I've basically beat this one to death. So let me touch on this real quick. So everything else I've explained, here's Biden on Twitter talking about it. He says, I will respect the limits of presidential powers that I have for 3 years and for 3.5 years. But any president, including Donald Trump, will now be free to ignore the law. I concur with what Justice Sotomayor wrote today. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. So do I. This is being said by a man who has no less than 3 times explicitly and specifically not only broken the law in explicit defiance of the Supreme Court, but went so far as to explicitly state that that is in fact what he was doing. On the eviction moratorium, the Supreme Court made the determination that neither the president nor the CDC, who were the interested parties at the time, had the authority to simply steal money from landowners outside of taxation. They did not have the authority to authorize tenants to steal money from the landowners from whom they rent. And so the eviction moratorium was ruled unconstitutional and unlawful by the Supreme Court. Joe Biden literally held a press conference to explain to the American people, we are going forward with the eviction moratorium. And I understand that the SCOTUS has said, I cannot do this under the law. But they won't be able to do anything about it for several months. So we're going to go ahead and do it anyway and make them catch up with us so I can at least buy some time. I can at least help you guys steal some more money for the next 6 months to a year. He gave a press conference explicitly explaining, I am breaking the law on purpose. Fuck Congress, fuck the Constitution, fuck the Supreme Court. I am the law because I am the president, and I don't care what the law says. I need to buy your votes. And here we go. Then he did it again with the college debt loan forgiveness. Twice the Supreme Court has said, you can't do this. And then he has said, I don't care. He's tweeted over and over again, the Supreme Court told me I can't do this, but that we're not going to let them stop us. And then forgiven a bunch of student loan debt, stolen a bunch of money from you, the taxpayer, to give to bums with shitty grievance studies degrees who can't get a real job because instead of learning something useful like plumbing or being a doctor or a dentist, etc., they studied underwater lesbian basket theory. And now they can hardly even pull you a coffee at Starbucks. In fact, they cannot pour me a coffee at Starbucks because I'm a better man than that. I don't go to fucking Starbucks. Whew. Now, so you got this. I will respect the limits of presidential powers that I have for 3.5 years. Now, that sentence isn't even entirely intelligible. But any president, including Donald Trump, will now be free to ignore the law. This guy has ignored the law over and over and over. He goes out of his way to commit crimes in office. Now, let's get to Sotomayor's dissent. What are you doing to me? Oh, sorry about that, guys. We're having, it looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. Come on. Need the quote. Okay. In an unsparing dissent, Sotomayor said the Supreme Court allowed a president to become a king above the law that limited the scope of criminal charges against former President Donald Trump. Now, and in this, they mentioned the January 6th riot. Fuck you, riot. It's right. No, demonstration, protest, lawful assembly. Right? That's anyway. The and she basically king above the law. She goes on to say the court effectively creates a law-free zone around the president, upsetting the status quo that has existed since the founding. What? Really? Has existed since the founding? Okay. I'm going to need you to support that argument. One of the standards of law happens to be the history of practice and precedent. So, I'm going to need you to take your big racist finger there, Justice Sotomayor, and point to a single historic example of the criminal prosecution of a former U.S. president or a sitting U.S. president. You can barely point to a handful of impeachments. In fact, you can't. She goes on, she says, ironic, isn't it? The man in charge of enforcing laws can now just break them. Tim Pool said the reading Sotomayor's dissent sounds less like a, and I've read the dissent in full, and he's absolutely right. It sounds less like the writing of a professional and sober justice of the Supreme Court and more like a feminist grievance blog. And it really does. This majority's project will have disastrous consequences for the presidency and for our democracy. And where's the thing where she... okay, they didn't cover it in this article. So reading the full text of her dissent, there's a section where she says, so the president, and this is why I wanted to show you all those, damn, I can't believe they skipped it here. Let me see if they've got the full text. They do not. I'd have to go digging for the full text, so you're just gonna have to trust me on this or go check and see if I'm lying. She goes on like this tirade in the middle of it that says, assassinates somebody with SEAL Team 6, immunity. Steals money from the Treasury, immunity. And just lists a bunch of absurd hypotheticals and the word immunity, and then the sentence fragment, immunity. She sounds like a fucking child writing this. And the fact is, like I said, this is why I showed you all those tweets before, that the liberal justices on the court are not intellectually distinct from the liberal propaganda artists working on Twitter. They have been given their marching orders. They've been given their talking points by the party. And their job is to repeat those talking points in every place that they can, which is why Roberts, who I'm not a fan of, right? But Roberts does write professional, even when he's wrong, even when his opinions are wrong. What he writes are professional, sober, literate, judicial opinions. Even when he gets it wrong on something like Obergefell, right? He does write a professional, sober opinion. But Sotomayor, who was confirmed despite her incredibly racist record, even in the wake of saying during the course of her confirmation hearing that I believe a wise Latina woman is more competent to make legal decisions, just decisions, than an old white man. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but not much. She basically said, I believe that brown women are better than white men, and that's why you should put me on the Supreme Court. And that's why she was put on the Supreme Court. In fact, much like Ketanji Brown Jackson, her color, her gender, and in KGB's case, her sexual orientation, are the reason she was put there. In Sotomayor's case, we have to speculate on that a little bit, because despite her record of racism, she was confirmed. In the case of Ketanji Brown Jackson, KBJ, anyway, in the case of Ketanji, we don't have to speculate, because just like with Kamala Harris, Biden made it a point beforehand to explicitly state, I will appoint a woman of color to the Supreme Court. Just like he explicitly stated, my vice president will be a woman of color. For any of you out there paying attention, by the way, while Joe Biden, as we knew before this court case, and as we now know confirmedly from this Supreme Court case, cannot be prosecuted for his crimes, he should absolutely be impeached for the crime of making a hiring decision, most especially in a government, in the context of a government job, based on sex, gender, orientation, race. And not on one of these factors, but all of them. Right? Because remember, KBG, right? She has a distinct sexual orientation, which is a protected class. She's a lesbian, right? And of course, Kamala Harris also has a protected class sexual orientation. She's a spit roast. That is a sexual orientation that the ruling party protects very carefully. Right? A good spit roast is hard to find when you're a Democrat. Incidentally, when you're a good conservative, you're not looking for them. You just, get married and raise a family like a fucking man. Whew! But the point to that rant, I went a little off. I went a little off track, but we got a good spit roast joke out of it. Is to say, the life lesson says, "Hey, don't diss on my harem." Okay. That's good. Okay. I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to take a break from all this. I know we're 45 minutes over. There's one more thing I want to tell you. I think I've sufficiently illustrated the points. SBAMG is a spit roast code for a hoe who bangs talk show hosts. No. Okay. Jokes lose their funny when you have to explain them. I'm not going to explain them too much, right? But just imagine. Willie Brown and Joe Biden discussing her appointment face to face. And so I think I've adequately explained why you should believe that these people, these leftists, these propagandists, are not actually as stupid as they appear to be. They're intentionally telling you lies. But back to the spit, okay, we made the spit roast joke. Need to take a break. Bring the temperature down a little bit. I'm about to share another piece of news related to the same court case. That's very good news. And I want you, but I want to kind of pattern break you so we go into it. And so I'll tell you a funny story. I was working with a team, and we had a shiny new young specialist who was working on getting his security clearance, and these were pretty high security clearances we were working with. So we had to take what's called a lifestyle polygraph test. Now, at a certain level of security clearance, once you hit the TS, and even depending on where you're going to be, even at the secret level, but once you hit the top secret level, you have to take a general polygraph, a lie detector test, where they sit you down and they ask you a bunch of questions, and it's all basically stuff like, do you have a bunch of debt? Are you vulnerable to bribes, et cetera, et cetera? Can we trust you? Then there's this thing called the lifestyles polygraph, and that's the one where they ask you the questions. They ask you if you do the weird stuff, right? They ask you, we do the weird stuff. Oh, so this young specialist had to go and take the lifestyles polygraph. And even though they got rid of don't ask, don't tell, when you take the lifestyles test, they're going to ask you, are you homosexual? And then they're going to ask you if you're out, right? They're going to ask you are you a closeted homosexual who is trying to keep it a secret and who therefore might be vulnerable to blackmail if someone were to discover this and threaten to out you, right? So they don't actually care if you're gay. What they care about is, are you trying to hide it? And if so, does that mean that somebody could find out and then use that to coerce you in order to that make you vulnerable, right? And that's what all the questions are about, right? They're asking you about all the weird stuff. Have you ever had sex with a prostitute? Have you ever had homosexual sex with a prostitute? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Swings, S&M, fetishes. They're gonna go down the whole list. One of the questions is, have you ever had sex with a farm animal? And this poor young specialist is about 19 or 20. You're supposed to answer yes or no to these questions, right? They're binary questions. Have you ever X? And they ask him, have you ever had sex with a farm animal? Because, hey, if you've had sex with a farm animal and Russia finds that out, that just might be the kind of thing that you'll sell some secrets to hide. That just might be the kind of thing that you might get blackmailed over. And this poor kid, he says, oh God, let me explain. We're all ready for it. He says, let me explain. Okay, here we go. Here we go. And he explains. And it was a very reasonable explanation. So what really happened was, when he was from the time he was 16 to 18, I think he said, he worked on a horse farm. And one of his jobs was to stud the horses. So he had to go and collect the semen from the stud horses in order to have the material to artificially inseminate the female horses. His job was to do that. Yes, life lesson. His job was to give jobs. Now, we never asked about the details of how exactly the specimen is collected, what the process there is like, if there was any apparatus involved, et cetera, et cetera. Right? We didn't ask any questions beyond that. Once he explained, I worked on a horse farm and my job was to stud horses. Okay. And then he went on to explain, I felt like I needed to say it like this because I was afraid that if I said no, it would technically be a lie. Oh, let's see, it's 2024. That was about 16 years ago, I'd say. And I can just about guarantee you that whatever unit that young specialist, who was probably a master sergeant by now, whatever unit he's in, they probably still call him Master Sergeant Stud. And I bet you 90% of the people who call him Master Sergeant Stud don't even know the story of how his call sign came about. Life Lesson asks, did you just check your watch that wasn't there? I did. That's actually one of my favorite jokes. that ooh, it's nope, I can't do it right now, it's nap time. That is one of my favorite jokes, is to check my non-existent watch and then make a declaration of the timing. Oh, but yeah, incidentally, one of my other favorite jokes is the one where you make a fact claim statement for the explicit purpose of eliciting a confirmation request and then denying, right? Hey, I got that exact same car. Oh, really? No. No further explanation, just walk away from it. Oh. That one kills me every time. Okay. Now, one last story to cover, and I think this one's especially interesting. I mentioned that this court case happened yesterday, and that it was a big fucking deal to my wife when I first got the notification that it had occurred. And she asked me immunity for what, and I said, well, this one has to do with with Trump's prosecution over the secret documents at Mar-a-Lago, and then I started reading some more of the articles. I was like, oh no, it's not over Mar-a-Lago. This is over Jack Smith and the January 6th thing. So I was actually wrong about that when I was initially talking about it with some people yesterday. And then I looked at it again as, oh no, this actually relates to both those cases, both of which are related to Jack Smith, and functionally it relates to every other criminal case that is currently being tried against Donald Trump without exception. There will be processes in courts over whether and how any of these cases are allowed to proceed. But the fact is that as of yesterday's Supreme Court ruling, it should be that all of the convictions were instantaneously and immediately overturned and vacated, and all of the other charges and prosecutions were immediately and instantaneously and irrevocably vacated without prejudice. But there's another element here that gives me hope. Clarence Thomas swipes at special counsel Jack Smith's appointment in SCOTUS immunity case. The Supreme Court's monumental decision informed President Trump's immunity case. One justice questioned whether special counsel Jack Smith, at the helm of Trump's unprecedented prosecution, was constitutionally appointed. Okay. Clarification. He wasn't. That fact is not in question or controversy. Thomas does a very good job of elucidating the details of that, but I'll summarize it for you quickly. Jack Smith is a private citizen who, prior to his appointment by AG Merrick Garland, held no official government position of any kind whatsoever. None. Let alone one with the authority to prosecute or enforce the law. He has been appointed by AG Merrick Garland to the office of the special prosecutor. This is an office which does not exist. It has existed on occasion in the past, but it is a specific special use office. The executive branch cannot create government offices. And they absolutely cannot create and then fill a government office. The creation of an office and the appointment of the position to fill the office requires the legislature to write legislation, a law creating the office, and then to conduct the activity of review and consent. Right? That's what's going on when you have the confirmation hearing for a Supreme Court justice or other type of executive appointees, etc. The office must be created by the force of law and then filled by the process of review and consent. No member of the executive branch has the authority to create and fill an office. It's that simple. So Jack Smith is not a special prosecutor. There is such thing as a special prosecutor. It has happened before. But it happens when the House initiates a bill, generates the funding, authorizes it, sends it to the Senate for the vote, and then it's signed by the president. And then nominees are reviewed, argued, consented, and confirmed. That Clarence Thomas went out of his way to write a completely separate opinion, clarifying and detailing this, is fucking chef's kiss magic. That could be the end of the entire process. So, final thought. I said this yesterday. You're going to hear me say this a lot. You're going to hear me go back to this a lot between now and the election. I'm obviously voting for Donald Trump, right? If they pull him off the ticket, I will write him in. Because it really is this simple. Your current options are World War III and the U.S. government actively subsidizing the child slave and child sex slave market while paying for both sides of the Ukraine-Russia conflict and both sides of the Israeli-Palestine conflict. Right? My money, somehow also my money. So my money is going to 4 separate hostile entities, none of whom I care to see existing tomorrow. Let me rephrase that so it doesn't sound quite so bad. It is not that I have an interest personally in seeing Israel, Palestine, Russia, or the Ukraine wiped off the map, destroyed, and utterly obliterated, gone from the memory of men. It's not that I want that to happen. It is that if it were to happen, to any one or any combination of the four, I would be completely ambivalent to it. It would not bother me. It wouldn't particularly please me. It just wouldn't even interest me. So your choices are between more forever wars, more inflation, groceries you can't afford, high gas prices, etc., etc. Choices between that, cheap, and on the other side, you've got cheap gas, high wages, and world fucking peace. Those are your options. Bad gas, World War III. Cheap gas, world peace. That said, I have this concern, and assuming we win in November and Donald Trump takes the White House, most especially if we really win in November and Republicans take command of the House and Senate, which might be a stretch. But I have this concern. We got him there once, and he didn't lock her up. One might assume that my interest in pursuing to every legal option the utter career destruction and hopefully lifetime incarceration of every corrupt prosecutor and judge involved in the clear conspiracy to defraud the American people through the illegitimate prosecution of Donald Trump, one might assume that that is a mean-spirited desire for revenge against political actors whose activities I disapprove of personally. And one would be correct. However, like I explained yesterday, two things can be true at the same time. Just because my personal preference, let's say a man slapped my wife in public, I can simultaneously want the police to arrest and incarcerate him for assault, aggravated assault, felony assault, aggravated battery, everything they can throw the fucking book at him. I can simultaneously call the police and pursue the legal avenue while also wishing, personally, to be able to put my hands on him and flay him with my own teeth. Which I guarantee you, in that particular set of circumstances, that personal desire would be working overtime to overcome my logical civic brain in trying to get the authorities to handle it correctly. I can absolutely have the deep emotional desire to see vengeance done against these people who have done clearly evil things, and also want to see the law applied. That Danny, equal application of the law, to see the law applied equally and correctly and justly. That he did not lock up Hillary Clinton when he was elected in 2016 is a precedent point of failure, which is in part responsible for the belief of these sociopaths today that they have the carte blanche immunity to conduct these clearly illegal prosecutorial actions in service of an obvious conspiracy to defraud the American people through the interference in an American federal presidential election. Put them all in jail. If there are no consequences for the bad, and more importantly in this particular case, criminal actions of the Democrat, then they will continue to behave badly. A very good example of this is the elections process. We were told over and over again that not only was 2020 a free and fair election in which voter fraud did not change the outcome, we were told that there was no fraud, that zero fraud occurred. Now, I don't know if you all know this. Those of you who have been watching me for a while have heard me explain it before. But the fact of the matter is this: there is fraud in every election without exception. Now, some of that fraud is technically fraud, but it's unintended, right? So-and-so moved, or maybe you have a vacation home and you bought it recently. You got a letter in the mail. You weren't paying attention, and you filled out somebody else's ballot because you were expecting to get an absentee or mail-in ballot. So, there are several ways that a person can unintentionally commit election fraud, and there are many ways that they can do it intentionally. Not only is there fraud in every single election, there is so much fraud in every federal election that the courts cannot prosecute all of it. And for that reason, unless it is a case of extraordinary and ignorable fraud, the courts choose to prosecute none of it. And we were expected to believe in 2020 that this one particular election, which was abnormal in the extreme as compared to every other election historically, in this one abnormal to the extreme election, there was not only not enough fraud to change the outcome, but zero fraud. It was the most secure. These people are asking you to believe, and it just can't do it. Lock them the fuck up. So, this is the longest show we've done in a hot damn minute. I appreciate every one of you who hung out for the whole show. In closing, yesterday I did promise you guys a show today about Chevron deference, which was the other major SCOTUS decision from last week. Yesterday, I went into great detail on the I was going to talk. Shit, I don't even remember now. Yesterday, I was going to talk about one thing and then Chevron deference, but I spent a whole lot of time on the other thing. But so I was going to talk about Chevron deference today. Tomorrow, unless there's some major breaking news today, tomorrow we're doing Chevron deference. Thursday, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the 4th of July, and then I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the several other cases, one of which, actually, let me touch this one just. Okay, this case from the Supreme Court that I've just spent the last hour and a half talking about, this one should be the death nail in all of the criminal cases against Donald Trump. But in particular, the one where Mershon instructed the jury that they could come back with a non-unanimous conviction based on a non-unanimous understanding of the underlying felony required to upgrade the illegitimate misdemeanor, which was a necessary condition. It was a necessary condition of converting the misdemeanor charges into felony charges for the purpose of illegitimately conducting an end run around the statute of limitations in order to charge Trump with non-crimes, which were declared non-crimes by multiple federal agencies, and which, had they even been crimes, they were misdemeanors within the jurisdiction wherein their statute of limitations had expired a while ago. Right? These crimes are more than the length of their statute of limitations beyond their statute of limitations. But there's another case. The Supreme Court has ruled, we'll talk about this more on Thursday, that no, a guilty verdict in a criminal trial requires unanimous consent, requires a unanimous verdict. Merchan gave the jury explicit instructions that they could convict Donald Trump without a unanimous verdict. And they turned in a non-unanimous verdict. Right? Essentially, they all agreed that he was guilty of something, but they did not agree what he was guilty of. To put this in context, somebody was accused of rape, murder, and stealing a car. And the jury came back and said, yeah, four of us think he stole the car. One of us thinks he did all three. This guy thinks that he just did the rape, and we have no idea how he thinks he got there and back. This guy's pretty sure that she's still alive, but he owes her a car. And so, we'll just throw the book at him. No. No. Unanimous verdict. It's necessary. So, you go ahead and put a pen in it there, because I'm not quite out of coffee yet, but I've been talking so damn much that I only got this far, and it's cold. Time to throw that one out and get a fresh one. So, thanks for watching, guys. We love you. We will see you tomorrow.